I didn't come back to cry. I came back to finish what they started. The moment I stepped into my office, I knew something was wrong. The air was too still, no papers, no scent of printer ink, no trace of the life I'd left behind 12 weeks earlier. My oak desk was gone. The framed diplomas I'd earned working nights through grad school gone. My nameplate lay in the trash, half buried under coffee cups. For 15 years, I'd built this place from nothing, and in less than 3 months of maternity leave, they'd erased me. Behind me, the door opened. "Evelyn, welcome back." Daniel Reeves' voice carried its usual confidence, the kind that filled rooms and covered lies. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "We've had a little restructuring while you were away. Nothing to worry about." I turned to face him, my daughter's carrier resting against my knee. "Restructuring," I repeated quietly. "That what you call it?" He chuckled, sensing danger but pretending not to. "Come on, Evelyn. You look great. Motherhood suits you." "Does it?" I said, because it seems to have cost me an office. Lynette from HR appeared behind him, clutching a clipboard like a shield. "We can explain. The board approved some departmental adjustments." I almost laughed. Adjustments. That's what they called stealing 15 years of work from a woman who dared to have a child. I walked past them, setting my daughter's carrier gently on the conference table, her soft breath steady in the quiet. Then I unzipped my leather bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Daniel's voice faltered. "What's that documentation?" I said simply, sliding it across the table. "Before you say anything, boss read this." He looked from me to the envelope, then back again. For a moment. He hesitated, then opened it. His eyes moved across the first page, then the second. His face lost all color. The hand holding the papers began to tremble. Outside, the hum of the city faded under the weight of the silence between us. That was the moment everything shifted 12 weeks earlier. I'd only suspected what they were capable of. Now, I had proof. 12 weeks before that morning, my office had been alive, charts on the wall, client reports spread neatly across my desk. My assistant Marina bringing in black coffee just how I liked it. Numbers had rhythm then. They obeyed me. I was 37, senior financial consultant at Westbrook and Reeve Capital, a firm that measured worth in billable hours and quarterly gains. For nearly a decade, I'd outperformed every projection. I didn't gossip, didn't linger over lunches, didn't trade favors for promotions. I earned everything with precision. When I told the team I was pregnant, there had been polite applause, the kind that lasts a little too long to sound real. Daniel, my boss, patted my shoulder and said, "You'll finally slow down a bit. Good for you." I laughed then, thinking it was harmless. The slowing down began the next week, except it wasn't mine. My biggest client presentation was reassigned, so you can rest. 2 new accounts I'd cultivated were handed to junior associates for continuity. Meetings were moved to times that clashed with my doctor appointments. It was subtle, calculated, and wrapped in good intentions. One afternoon, I stayed late to finish a quarterly report. As I stepped into the stairwell, I heard voices echoing from below. Troy and Philip, the firm's rising stars, were laughing. "Once she's got that kid, she's done," Troy said. "Daniel's already talking about redistributing her portfolio." Philip chuckled. "She'll be drowning in diapers. Clients need someone who actually picks up the phone." Their laughter climbed the stairwell like smoke, thick and suffocating. I froze on the landing, one hand gripping the rail. It wasn't just arrogance, it was strategy. They were planning my disappearance before I'd even left. That night, I sat in the quiet glow of my kitchen, hand resting over the small curve of my stomach, and understood something I'd never allowed myself to see before. In this world, a woman could give everything her time, her loyalty, her brilliance, and still be treated like a temporary guest. And for the first time, I started keeping copies of everything. The morning I returned to work, Chicago was still half asleep beneath a pale winter sky. My daughter, Clara, blinked up at me from her carrier as if she sensed that this wasn't just another day, it was a reckoning. I'd imagined coming back countless times, rehearsed the simple rhythm of routine morning coffee, elevator hum, the quiet satisfaction of a spreadsheet balanced to the scent. But when the elevator doors opened, none of that remained. My desk was gone, the shelves stripped bare, the framed photos of my team, the handwritten notes from clients, the solid oak desk Daniel had once called Evelyn's command center all vanished. In its place sat a stranger, a young associate, barely out of college, typing furiously at a laptop. She looked up, startled. "Oh, you must be Mrs. Hartman. They moved your things to storage, Mrs. Hartman." As if I'd become someone's afterthought, someone's parenthesis. I thanked her quietly and walked toward the conference room where HR waited. Lynette smiled the way people do before delivering bad news they've already rehearsed. "Evelyn, welcome back. How's the baby?" "She's perfect," I said. My voice sounded distant, even to me. Daniel arrived moments later, his cologne hitting the room before he did. "We're thrilled to have you back," he said, settling into a chair across from me. "Of course. We've made some adjustments to ensure a smoother transition." "Adjustments," I repeated. "Yes," Lynette chimed in, reading from her clipboard. "Your client accounts have been redistributed for now, but we've identified a new role that might fit your situation better: reduced hours, less travel, more work-life balance." Daniel smiled as if he were doing me a favor. "We want to set you up for success. Evelyn, something more manageable for a new mother." For a moment, the hum of the city outside disappeared. The air thickened, cold and heavy. I heard Clara's faint sigh in my memory and forced myself to breathe. I nodded slowly. "I appreciate the consideration," I said, my tone even, betraying nothing. But that night, in the quiet of my apartment, as I rocked Clara to sleep, I whispered into the dark, "You took my desk. Now I'll take your foundation." The day after that meeting, I stopped crying before the tears even started. I'd spent the night pacing between Clara's crib and the kitchen window, replaying every word Daniel had said, every polished phrase designed to sound like concern, but built to erase me. By morning, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to ask for fairness. I was going to document everything. I began with my inbox. Years of correspondence, client updates, meeting notes, all of it meticulously filed in color-coded folders. I'd always been teased for being the librarian, the one who archived every email, logged every call. Now, that habit became my shield. I printed what mattered, saved backups to encrypted drives, cataloged every file like it was a weapon. By noon, I made a call I'd never imagined needing to make. "Isabel Tran," came the voice on the other end, calm, deliberate. We'd gone to college together before she'd taken the law route, building a quiet reputation in labor rights. "It's Evelyn," I said. My throat tightened. "I think I'm being pushed out." There was a pause. Then the sound of pen against paper. "Tell me everything." That afternoon, she came by with her laptop and a thermos of jasmine tea. Isabel wasn't one for outrage. She dealt in facts. "Start with what you can prove," she said. "The rest will follow." So I did. Emails showing how my accounts were reassigned for client stability. Meeting summaries that excluded my name. Payroll records marking my temporary transition weeks before my leave was even filed. Every line built a timeline, and every timestamp whispered intent. When Isabel left, she hugged me lightly. "Keep your notes, Evelyn. They'll forget what they said, but your documentation won't." Later that night, while Clara nursed in the half-light of the living room, I scrolled through messages from Marina, my assistant. She'd worked with me for 6 years, loyal and steady. Her latest text came with a photo of Clara's knit blanket. "Cute," she wrote. "Also Troy's meeting with your clients Friday. Want me to listen in?" I smiled, my first real smile in weeks. "Do it," I typed back. "And save everything, each night after." When the city quieted and Clara drifted to sleep, I built my archive line by line, a fortress made not of anger, but evidence. By early March, my apartment looked less like a home and more like a war room. Manila folders covered the dining table. Legal pads lined the counter. Every evening, after putting Clara to sleep, I sat beneath the dim kitchen light, reviewing notes with Isabel over video calls. Her calm voice grounded me. "We'll start with a preliminary EEOC filing," she said. "Nothing loud yet, just a signal that you're not invisible." Invisible. The word had burned since that morning in Daniel's office. Filing the complaint didn't erase the insult, but it gave its structure a beginning. Weeks passed, and the silence from Westbrook and Reeve was telling. No apology, no offer of reinstatement. They believed I'd stay home, too consumed with motherhood to fight back. That mistake would cost them. I started reaching out to clients not to recruit, just to say hello. Old habits die hard. I remembered birthdays, kids' names, favorite wines, one by one. They asked the same question, "Where have you been?" "We heard you took a step back." The lie was consistent across every call. Each conversation left me both furious and focused. When I called Valerie Chin, she answered on the first ring. Valerie was one of my oldest clients, managing a pension fund on Chicago's North Shore. Pragmatic, sharp, and allergic to pretense. "I heard what they did," she said without preamble. "They told my board you'd left voluntarily. I didn't believe it. They made sure it looked that way." I replied. There was a pause, then the faint clatter of her pen. "You ever thought about starting your own firm?" I laughed softly. "With what office?" "My kitchen table." Valerie's tone warmed. "I have space on Sheridan Road unused since the pandemic. It overlooks the lake. If they can't see your value, Evelyn, show them from across the street." That night, I lay awake watching the glow of the city outside my window. Across the lake, the skyline shimmered cold, ambitious, unyielding. I'd spent years building someone else's foundation. Maybe it was time to build my own. 2 weeks later, the paperwork for Hartman Advisory Partners was approved. I printed the certificate and taped it above my desk, right beside Clara's photo. The next morning, Marina texted a single line that made me smile. "Operation North Shore is a go." 3 months after my leave began, I walked back into the 26th floor of Westbrook and Reeve with a smile that wasn't quite real. The receptionist froze when she saw me. She'd probably been told I'd moved on. I didn't correct her. I simply asked for a visitor's pass and took the elevator up, Clara's carrier resting against my hip. I was here, officially, to collect my belongings. Unofficially, I was ready to end the performance they'd been staging in my absence. Daniel met me outside the conference room, flanked by Lynette from HR. His voice was smooth, but there was a flicker of discomfort behind his practiced charm. "Evelyn, so glad you could make it. We were just talking about next steps." Inside, the table gleamed under fluorescent lights. 2 folders waited, one labeled Transition, the other Compensation Review. I took my seat without a word. Lynette smiled too brightly. "We've created a new position for you part-time. Flexible hours, reduced client load. It's perfect for someone balancing new responsibilities at home." Daniel nodded. "We want you to have more family time. Think of this as support, not a step down." I listened, letting their words pile up like dust. Half the salary, half the responsibility, half the dignity. When they finally paused, I leaned forward slightly. "I appreciate the thought," I said softly. "Could you give me the offer in writing?" Relief flickered across Daniel's face. "Of course. That's standard procedure." "Good." I reached into my bag and set a thick manila envelope on the table, the same one I'd been carrying for weeks. "Then I have something for you as well." Daniel frowned. "What is this documentation?" I said, sliding it toward him. He opened it, expecting signatures. Instead, his eyes met pages of transcribed conversations, his own voice. Troy's. Philip's discussing how to ease Evelyn out quietly before she makes trouble. The following sheets bore the stamp of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Color drained from his face. Lynette's hand went still over her clipboard. The hum of the air vents filled the silence. Clara stirred softly in her carrier, a tiny sigh cutting through the tension. I reached over, adjusted her blanket, and looked up at Daniel. Before we talk about offers, I said, calm and steady, you might want to read the rest. The next morning, sunlight spilled over Lake Michigan like liquid glass, glittering against the windows of the rented conference room on Sheridan Road. It wasn't large, just a polished oak table, a coffee station, and enough chairs for the people who had once trusted me with their futures. One by one. They arrived fund directors, business owners, retirees who had built entire lives on the numbers I'd managed for them. Valerie Chin was the first to walk in, her stride brisk, her coat draped perfectly over one arm. "So, this is the view from the other side," she said, glancing toward the skyline across the water. "I'd say it suits you." I smiled faintly. Let's hope the view lasts. By 10 o'clock, every seat was filled. Conversations softened as I stood. For a moment, the hum of the lake filled the silence between us. "I know you received notifications from Westbrook and Reeve," I began, emails saying I'd chosen to step back from my role to spend more time with family. I paused, scanning the faces of people I'd advised for years. That wasn't true. I was removed while on maternity leave without warning or consent. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs, sharp inhales, and quiet disbelief. Patricia Moore, who managed the teacher's pension fund, shook her head. "They told us you recommended your replacements. I thought that sounded unlike you." "It was unlike me," I said, but I learned something from the way they handled it. Value isn't proven by a title. It's proven by consistency, and you all deserved consistency. From her seat, Valerie reached for the folder in front of her and opened it. Inside were the prepared transfer forms, documents Isabel had reviewed twice and notarized that morning. "These authorize the immediate transfer of your accounts to Hartman Advisory Partners," she explained to the room. "If you wish to follow Evelyn, this is your opportunity, one by one." Pens began to move. The sound was quiet, but it carried more weight than any speech I could have given. Each signature was a small act of rebellion, ink on paper against an institution that had mistaken silence for surrender. When Valerie handed me the final form, she smiled. "Sign here," she said, her voice calm but fierce, "and watch the tide turn." I took the pen, glanced out the window at the endless sweep of the lake, and signed. For the first time in months, I felt the ground shift not beneath me, but beneath them. By the time Isabel and I stepped out of the elevator, the 26th floor was in chaos. Assistants hurried between offices, phones rang unanswered, and the air had that electric stillness that comes before a storm. Marina had texted me minutes earlier. "They're in the boardroom, everyone's tense. The merger vote is tomorrow." The double glass doors were closed, voices rising behind them. Daniel's sharp and defensive. The board chairs measured but strained. Isabel adjusted her blazer, her calm a perfect contrast to the noise. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. "Let's make it quick." When we entered, every conversation stopped. 12 men and women turned toward us, their faces a mixture of irritation and unease. Daniel stood near the projector, his tie askew, his confidence faltering. "This is a private meeting," he said tightly. "I know," I replied. "That's why I thought you'd want this privately too." I placed a leather portfolio on the polished table. Isabel slid it forward until it rested in front of the chairman. Howard Crane, a man whose handshake used to crush and reassure in the same motion. He hesitated before unzipping it. Inside were 2 sets of documents, the client transfer forms and the EEOC's official complaint notice. The silence that followed was almost tender in its disbelief. Howard scanned the first few pages, then looked up at Daniel. "Is this real?" Daniel's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Isabel spoke for me, her voice even. "It's real, and it's thorough. What you're seeing is the cost of ignoring federal law." The room erupted. Questions collided with accusations. A woman at the far end whispered, "The Marston merger depends on those assets." Someone else muttered, $3.8 billion gone. I watched Daniel's face drain of color as the reality set in. He tried to steady himself. "She solicited clients. This violates her contract." Isabel raised an eyebrow. "Actually, It doesn't. They contacted her after being misled about her departure. There are recordings. The board members looked at me differently then, not as an employee, not even as an adversary, but as the woman who'd just shifted the balance of their entire empire. I gathered my coat, feeling the weight of their silence behind me. "I'll let you all get back to your meeting," I said softly, though I suspect the agenda has changed. As the door closed behind us, the shouting began. I didn't turn around. 3 weeks later, the view from my new office stretched across the river to the glass tower I once called home. The name Westbrook and Reeve still gleamed on its side, but the building seemed smaller now, its mirrored surface dulled by the winter haze. News traveled fast. The merger with Marston Capital had collapsed within 48 hours of the boardroom confrontation. Daniel and 2 senior partners resigned under personal circumstances. The firm issued a vague press release about leadership restructuring. Behind the language, I could read the truth, panic disguised as professionalism. Here, across the street, the mood was different. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Hartman Advisory Partners, catching on new brass nameplates, freshly printed letterheads, and Marina's framed photo of the team. She stood by the reception desk, headset on, coordinating transfers with her usual quiet precision. Valerie was in the next room, finalizing contracts with our newest client. Her voice carried through the glass walls, steady, confident, assured. It was the sound of something beginning, not ending. I moved to the window where Clara slept in her bassinet, one tiny hand resting against her cheek. The hum of the city blended with the soft rhythm of her breathing. I thought of the long nights at the kitchen table, of files stacked like barricades, of the envelope that had changed everything. They thought motherhood would make me smaller, I murmured, brushing a strand of hair from Clara's forehead. But it made me unstoppable. The phone on my desk rang once, twice. I answered. "Evelyn Hartman," I said. "Miss Hartman." "This is Patricia Moore," came the familiar voice of the pension fund director. "I'd like to move our accounts to your firm, effective immediately." I smiled, glancing out at the skyline. "We'll take good care of them." As I hung up, the wind picked up outside, sweeping along the river and rattling the flags that lined the bridge. It sounded almost like applause. I turned back toward the office where my team worked with quiet focus, and my daughter slept beneath the light of a new morning. Across the street, the tower that had once defined me now looked like a relic of someone else's story.